interference. This is all Biden-run things, meaning Biden and his thugs, because I don't know if he knows he's alive. And it's a shame. It's a shame what's happening to our country. This is election interference. They are doing things that have never been done in this country before. We've never had anything like it, certainly not at this level, but we've really had nothing like it that I've been able to find. It does happen a lot in third world countries, banana republics. If you look at what we just left, you have a case which they're dying to get this thing started. The judge cannot go faster. He wants to get it started so badly. And there's tremendous corruption. You have Pomerantz, Mark Pomerantz. He was Hillary Clinton's lawyer, or Democrat National Committee's lawyer. He worked in Paul Weiss. He walked in and he took over the district attorney's office. Nobody's ever seen anything like that, to prosecute Trump. And then they wouldn't do what he wanted to do, and he goes out and he writes a book. Long before any decisions were made, he writes a book about it. And the book gets published, and everybody's reading his book. And the judge said there's nothing wrong with that. And if you look at Bragg had a fit over that. Bragg said this trial is now dead. We can't do the trial. Well, that was one of the problems, and the judge should have allowed that to happen. And you had other instances like Colangelo. Colangelo is a radical left from the DOJ who was put into the state working with Letitia James, and then was put into the district attorney's office to run the trial against Trump. And that was done by Biden and his thugs also, because they can't win an election because of the borders, because of energy prices, because of inflation, because of Afghanistan, the worst and most embarrassing day in the history of our country. He can't win because of Russia, because of all the problems, because of Ukraine being attacked by Russia. And he can't win because of the October 7th attack of Israel, which he should have never allowed to happen, would have never happened if I were president. Ukraine would have never been attacked if I was president. And you wouldn't have inflation if I was president. We didn't have inflation. So all of these things, so what they do is they do election interference, which is court cases, and let's try and tie him up, and let's take as much of his money as possible. I respect the appellate division for substantially reducing that ridiculous amount of money that was put on by a corrupt judge named Engoron. He ought to be looked at, seriously looked at, especially what he did with valuations. He's the one, he's a fraudulent valuator, where he values Mar-a-Lago at $18 million, and people say it's worth 50 to 100 times that much, the biggest experts in the business. So he ought to be looked at, and James ought to be looked at, because she tried to get him. She's like the puppet master of the judge. And, you know, our state, this state, is losing tremendous prestige. It's losing its companies. It's losing its people. They're fleeing, and violent crime is flourishing. And we can't have that. We can't have that. No city should have that. And it's happening in other cities, but not with the lawfare. The lawfare that they're doing is incredible. So they could have done this in the case of the trial that we just left, one of the many that are going. Every single one of them is run by Biden and his thugs. It's the only way they think they can get elected. And I think so far it's backfiring, because the people of this country understand it. It's backfiring. But they're being run, and they're running all of these different cases. So ridiculous, the cases. Every one of them is ridiculous. You take a look at any one of them, and you say any one of them, it wouldn't make any difference. This is all weaponization of DOJ and FBI. They raided my house in violation of a thing called the Fourth Amendment. Not allowed to do that. They raided my house in Florida, Mar-a-Lago. No notice, no nothing. They raided it. I can't believe it. Nobody can believe it. And we'll see how that all works out in the end. But it's illegal what they're doing. It's criminal what they're doing. And it's never been done before in this country. You can't have an election in the middle of a political season. We just had Super Tuesday, and we had a Tuesday after Tuesday already, and we had Louisiana the other day, a couple of days ago, and we won in a record number, the highest number ever recorded. But we're in the middle of an election right now, and we're fighting crooked Joe Biden, who's the worst president in the history of our country, by far, who's let this country go to hell. The borders, millions and millions of people coming in from prisons, from mental institutions. They're terrorists. Many people coming in from prisons and mental institutions. Think of it. And terrorists are coming into our country. And this guy's just letting them come in by the millions. I think we have 15 million people already. People don't say that. I say it. And I'll bet I'm right, too. So we're going through this weaponization of our government to try and knock out somebody's political opponent. And so far, based on the polls, it's not working at all. The people understand it. We have a man who just ruled he'd like the trial to start in 21 days or something. And I don't know how you can have a trial that's going on right in the middle of an election. Not fair. Not fair. It's not fair at all. He knows that, too. He's a Democrat judge. He wants to do that because they're all trying to damage Trump as much as possible. It's having the reverse effect, but maybe someday it won't. I don't know. But it's having the reverse effect. It's a terrible, terrible precedent, a terrible thing to do. They could have started this when I left office. You could have gone back 3 years, more than that. When I left office, all of these things could have been started so we wouldn't be quibbling over starting this week or that week or 2 days or 3 days. It wouldn't have mattered. This thing would have been over 2 years ago. They could have started. They should have never started because there's no case. If you read Andy McCarthy's piece, if you read Jonathan Turley's piece, if you read legal scholars all over the world, they say this DA case is a hoax and it's something that shouldn't have. It's not even a crime. They say there's no crime, and there is no crime. So I just say it's a sad day for this country when you have something like this. And remember the words, should have been started 3 years ago if they were going to start it at all. And then you wouldn't be quibbling over what week it's going to, days. They're quibbling over days and hours. They wouldn't be quibbling at all. They never started it. And you know why they didn't start it? Because they didn't know I'd be running. And they didn't know how well I'd do. And if I were not running, or if I were doing poorly like everyone else has done, because they're all gone, they're all knocked out except for crooked Joe Biden. If I were doing poorly, this wouldn't be happening. None of these trials would have been happening. If I wasn't running, they wouldn't be happening. So it's a sad day in our country in many respects. But the good day is that the appellate division was fair. It's a lot of money still, but the judge is corrupt, in my opinion. He's the most overturned judge. He's been overturned 5 times in this case alone. He ruled against me before he even knew anything about the case. He ruled against me. The whole case was all about damages, and there were no damages. And perhaps you'll get him to tell you about what took place in terms of a settlement negotiation, because those weren't the numbers he was discussing. Those weren't the numbers. It's a disgrace what's happening in our country. And we have to get our country back, and we're going to get our country back. That's what's going to happen. November 5th, I believe, will be the most important day in the history of our country. We'll get these people out of there, and we'll seal up the borders, and we'll, as I say, drill, baby, drill. We'll be drilling. We'll get energy costs down. We'll get rid of the ridiculous electric car mandate, so nobody's ever heard of anything so foolish and so stupid. And we'll bring crime back to law and order. We're going to get those words law and order back, because our cities are a disaster. Greatly respect the decision of the appellate division, and we will abide by that. We'll put up cash or bond very quickly, securities, cash or bond, whatever it is. We'll put it up very quickly, and we'll win the case. Todd, maybe I'll have Todd say a couple of words, and then I'll have any questions or anything you want to ask. Okay, Todd, wherever you may be, please.
Thank you, President Trump. So, as we said in court today, we very much believe that starting this trial in April, or even starting this trial at any point before the election, is completely unfair to President Trump. It's completely unfair to the American people who are evaluating who they want to be the next president. And we are going to continue to fight. We're going to continue to do everything that we can to defend President Trump in that courtroom. And like we said today, we believe that we have a tremendous amount of information now in our hands to help us do that. And in any event, we certainly feel as if the date that Judge Merchan held today, April 15th, is not a date we should go to trial, and we're going to continue to fight.
And if you read the Andy McCarthy article, or Jonathan Turley, or many of the legals, I think almost every single one of them, that's not even a crime. We're being tried for something that's not even a crime. They say at most it's a misdemeanor, but there's no misdemeanor either. So We have violent criminals that are murdering people, killing people. We have drug dealers all over the place, and they go free and they can do whatever they want. But they go after Trump when there's not even a crime. And did you see the number of people were there? You had Colangelo, and behind him, and remember this, Colangelo was a DOJ guy. He's a Biden DOJ guy. Why is he in the Manhattan DA's office trying the case? That in itself is a conflict. He's in the Manhattan DA's office trying the case. I mean, that's called a conflict. And then remember what I told you also, Mark Pomerantz, when Bragg heard about it, he went openly hostile. He said, that's one of the worst things I've heard, and you all covered that. Then all of a sudden, time goes by. You know, the great healer is time. Time goes by, and all of a sudden they forget that. But that's a terrible thing. Colangelo and Pomerantz, terrible thing. And the judge didn't want to rule on that. He said everything was fine, that what they did was fine. I don't think it's fine when they take a Hillary Clinton lawyer and put him in to prosecute me. I don't think that's fine. I think it's very bad. And he does it on the House. He does it without fee. I don't want any fee. I don't want any fee. Our country has gone down a long way. Cliff, would you like to say something?
Just simply, we're gratified by the Appellate Division's decision today, which shows that there still is a rule of law in New York and that the Appellate Division is following it. Thank you, sir.
So do you get an acquittal in this trial, in the Merchan trial?
Well, I shouldn't have a trial. This is not a trial. This is not an act of criminality.
But you are having one, so do you?
I don't know if we're having one. We're going to be appealing right now. I can tell you that. We did nothing wrong, just like I did nothing wrong in the other case. My statements, my financial statements were conservative. They were low, not high. I mean, he valued Mar-a-Lago at a tiny fraction of what it is. He's the fraud. He created a fraud in order to help his narrative and her narrative, because he does whatever she wants. And the judge is really, what he's done is fraudulent. He made Mar-a-Lago, you know it very well, Maggie. He made Mar-a-Lago into $18 million. I had many offers. They said, I'll give you 19. Okay? You could take half of the living room is worth more than that. So it's worth anywhere from 50 to 100 times that amount. And he stays with it. So he's either whacked out or dishonest, one or the other, or both, probably both. But he's a disgrace to the system. And I think that New York State was helped a lot today by the decision. I'll give you an example. Truth Social is doing very well. It's hot as a pistol and doing great. And it's going public. And the New York Stock Exchange wants to have us badly. And I told them, we can't do the New York Stock Exchange. You treat it too badly in New York. We don't want to do the New York Stock Exchange. And the people at the Stock Exchange are very, very upset about it. The top person is mortified, can't believe it. He said, I'm losing business because of New York, because people don't want to be in New York and they don't want to go on the New York Stock Exchange. So you can ask them about it. But, you know, how can you do that? I'd love to go on the New York Stock Exchange. It was always, you know, it would be a big thing to go on the New York Stock Exchange. That would be nice. But people aren't going on the New York Stock Exchange now because of what's happening in New York, because they don't want to be attacked by a thug like this horrible Attorney General that we have in New York, the worst in the whole country. So we'll decide about Truth Social and what we do with it. But there's just an example of how this is hurting New York and New York State. Yeah.
Mr. President, can you give us a little bit more detail about the timing of when you plan to secure the bond and how exactly you're planning to pay the bond?
Well, as they say, I have a lot of cash. You know I do because you looked at my statements. I mean, you've been examining my statements for a long time, and I have much more than that in cash. But I would also like to be able to use some of my cash to get elected. They don't want me to use my cash to get elected. They don't want that. They don't want me taking cash out to use it for the campaign. And they looked at it, and this judge looked at it, and he's part of the whole deal. And, well, he's such a disgrace for this city. Again, the most overturned judge. There's never been, that we can find, a case where a judge has been overturned now 5 times. It was 4 times, now it's 5 times. Been overturned. But I have a lot of cash and a great company. I mean, to think they want to go after a company, this is a great company, a company that's doing very well. I've got very low debt on buildings, like this building. I have very low debt on this building. Most buildings I have no debt. Most clubs I have no debt. Look at my greatest assets, I have no debt. I didn't even include like brand value, and the brand value is, I became president because of the brand, let's say. But the brand value is, it's one of the most valuable brand values. So I think I wouldn't swap it for any other brand in the world. Trump. I don't even put anything down for it. I had very conservative statements. And the way they made him look bad is by valuing Mar-a-Lago at $18 million instead of what the real value is, which was at least 50 to maybe 100 times more. Think of that. This is the fraud. They're creating a fraud, and they're hurting the state so badly. And then I can't go into the New York Stock Exchange because I can't do business, because I don't want to do, not because I can't, because I don't want to do business in New York. And the people at the New York Stock Exchange, I can tell you right now, and they're very fine people, they're not happy. Yeah, you were going to say something.
Mr. President, you mentioned the cash you have. You said on Friday it's something like $500 million. You intended to put some of that into the campaign. Now that the bond's been reduced, are you going to start putting money into your campaign? You haven't done that since 2016.
Well, first of all, it's none of your business, I mean, frankly. But I might do that. I have the option. But if I have to spend $500 million on a bond, I wouldn't have that option. I'd have to start selling things. I don't have to sell anything because it's a phenomenal company. Look, I built a phenomenal company. Someday they'll actually report that. I built a phenomenal company that's very low leverage, unbelievably low leverage, with a lot of cash, a lot of everything else. Why should I let a crooked judge make a decision to give $450 million that allows me to spend very little money on my campaign if I so choose? I'll be spending money on my campaign. I might spend a lot of money on my campaign, but I should have that option. A crooked judge shouldn't say, we're going to have you post a bond and take all of that money that I could be spending on a campaign or other things if I want to do other things. So we were gratified by the professionalism of the opinion today. I thought it was I think it's a very important opinion for New York, but the only thing that's going to really solve that problem is when I win, because you're going to have to win. Because no company is going to be coming to New York if I don't win that case. That case is a scam, it's a sham, and it's a hoax.
How does this
Would you ever accept money from a foreign government to pay the bond or their fines or?
No, I don't do that. I think you'd be allowed to, possibly. I don't know. I mean, if you go borrow from a big bank, many of the banks are outside of this, as you know. The biggest banks, frankly, are outside of our country. So you could do that, but I don't need to borrow money. I have a lot of money. I built a great company, but I don't want to have a crooked judge named Engoron and a crooked, horrible, the worst, I would say without question, Attorney General in the country, the most obnoxious and the worst Attorney General in the whole country. And she did it for political reasons. Go back and take a look at her ads. We will stop Trump. Well, she knows nothing about me. I'd never heard of her. She was advertising, and she took ads in saying, we will stop Trump, we will stop him. Vicious. I said, boy, that's a bad one. Then I looked, she got elected. But then she tried to do it with the governor, and it didn't work. She went after the current governor, who's much more talented than she is. She went after the current governor. She was very nasty, and she polled at about 3%. She polled at nothing, and after 6 weeks or 7 weeks, she pulled out of the race. She ran for governor, you know, on what she was doing to me. She thought that would work. It didn't work. I just think that it's very important that, you know, this is a time when businesses have a choice to go to a lot of places, including other countries. They don't have to stay in our country, but they can certainly go also to a lot of other states. A lot of people going to Texas, Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, a lot of South Carolina, and you have a lot of competition. You shouldn't be persecuting people that have done a great job. I paid $300 million approximately over the years in taxes here. $300 million. That's a lot of money. And you're going to lose those people that pay all that money, and you're not even going to have a state anymore. They just won't be able to do it. Yeah.
Sir, but back to the trial here in 3 weeks. Do you plan to testify, and are you concerned?
Which hearing?
The trial here.
I don't know that you're going to have the trial. I don't know how you can have a trial like this in the middle of an election, a presidential election. And this is, again, this is a Biden trial. These are all Biden trials because Colangelo worked for Biden. Can you imagine they take a guy out of DOJ and they put him into the Attorney General's office and then into the Manhattan DA's office to go after Trump? These are all Biden trials. So I don't know that you're going to have it. I think we're going to get some court rulings. Yeah, please.
But will you testify if that trial goes forward in 3 weeks?
I would have no problem testifying. I didn't do anything wrong.
And would you be concerned that a conviction, if you are convicted in that trial, could cost you the election, given what Todd said voters are...
Well, it could also make me more popular because the people know it's a scam. It's a Biden trial. This is a Biden. There is no trial. There's a Biden trial. Colangelo, the man who stood up, had the nerve to actually stand up and take over. You know, he's been sitting in the background for the last year. Today he went right up front because they figure he buffaloed the whole public and the writers, including you people. He got them buffaloed. They forgot. They didn't, you know, a little while ago. Time sort of people forget with time. They don't have good memories. I do. They don't have good memories. But Colangelo from the DOJ was put there to go after Trump. And today he stood up and he took over the whole office. He's been running the whole thing. He's been signing the letters. He's been doing things for a long time. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. This is all done by the Democrat Party, and it's all done by Biden and his group. I don't know if it's Biden because I don't know if Biden is even sharp enough. I don't know if Biden knows what's happening. You want to know the truth. Maybe he does. He probably does. But this is all done by Biden and the thugs that work for Biden. And it's a very bad thing. It's a very dangerous thing for our country. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Hi everyone, and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Rosana, and today's recipe is gonna revolutionize the way you cook. Just because if you haven't been able to find chorizo, guess what? We are making it today. That's right, we're making pork chorizo. You can even make this with beef. It's incredible and you're gonna love this recipe. I'm excited. How about we get started? Okay, the first thing we're gonna do is prep the dried peppers, and what I have here is 4 guajillo peppers and 1 pasilla. What's gonna happen is, you've seen me do this before, is cut the stem off, cut the pepper open, just like this, and remove the seeds and veins. Now, if you wanna wear kitchen gloves for this, please feel free to do so because we don't want you to get spicy hands. It can really hurt. I'm used to it, so they should be fine for me. By the way, if you notice, these guajillos are actually medium size. Just keep that in mind because they do tend to come in all shapes and sizes. Do the same thing with 1 large pasilla chile. Did you know pasilla actually means little raisin because of its wrinkles? It looks very similar to an actual raisin. It's lightly sweet, has a grassy flavor to it, slightly acidic, and mild in heat. All right, these are all the dried peppers we're using today. Now, we're going for a mild pork chorizo. If you want it spicier, I suggest you add 2 to 3 chiles de árbol to give you that nice kick of heat. All right, let's head to the stove. Come on. I bet you recognize my comal, right? You've seen this in plenty of videos when I do roasting, and we're gonna be toasting the chiles on here again. All right, so just place them on here, and I have the heat on low because we don't want them to burn. So just turn them as needed, or should I say continuously, because you don't want them to burn. What'll happen is they're gonna turn really bitter and it's gonna ruin your sauce. Believe me, you don't want that. If that ever happens to you, I suggest you throw away the peppers and just start over. So what you want here is for them to release that beautiful fragrance. And as soon as they start to do that, we're gonna remove them. I can smell these already. And if you touch them, they're hot on both sides as well. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove them. At this point, let's go ahead and rinse them. I've rinsed the dried peppers. Now we're gonna cut them into bite-sized pieces and just place them inside a large container. Then we're gonna add enough water to cover them. That way they rehydrate And this process takes about 5 minutes. Look what I have here. This beautiful piece of rock called molcajete is gonna do wonders in this recipe. So if you have one at home, make sure you bring it out because we're gonna be mashing our spices and herbs and we're gonna create a beautiful, flavorful paste that's just amazing. Now, if you don't have a molcajete at home, don't worry because I will let you know where to incorporate all of these ingredients later in the recipe. As you can see, I have placed a clean kitchen towel under the molcajete because I don't want it to scratch the surface that I'm working on. So feel free to do that too. Okay, so we're gonna start with 4 peeled garlic cloves. Put them right in there. Also do 1 teaspoon of whole black peppercorns and 4 whole cloves. Right in there. What I like to do is tap on the ingredients first because I don't want them to start jumping around. When the oils begin to release from the garlic and you see all of the peppers crushed, what I like to do is add 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt to help break everything down. Everything inside the molcajete has broken down. It doesn't have the consistency that we want yet, but it is time to add the rest of the ingredients. And that's gonna be 1/2 teaspoon of whole cumin, 1/2 teaspoon of dry oregano, and 1/2 teaspoon of dry marjoram. And finally, 1/2 teaspoon of dry thyme. Now let's put some muscle into this and get this really finely ground. Right now we're gonna add a little bit of apple cider vinegar just to get all of that paste mixed in, loosened up. So go ahead and add 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. You can use white distilled vinegar as well. Mix everything in with the rock. Transfer it to a different container. There's still so much flavor in here. We're gonna go ahead and remove it. So to do that, we need to add 1 tablespoon of water in here. And with the rock, target all the areas and try to get as much of that flavor penetrated into the water. The reason why I didn't do water before is because we do want to add as little as possible. And the reason why I didn't do vinegar anymore, it's because we have a measured amount that we want to keep ourselves down to. Just go ahead and transfer all of that into the same container you have the paste in. Okay, now set this aside. Let's move on to the blending part of this recipe. If you don't have a molcajete, add all of those ingredients into the blender at this point. Go ahead and add all of the dried peppers, the ones we hydrated, and only add the peppers, not the water. Isn't it awesome that we can make our own chorizo? I get super excited. Okay, do not throw the water from the guajillos away because we may need it later on, so keep it on the side. Now add in 1/4 of a medium yellow onion and 1/2 cup of apple cider vinegar, and you can also use white distilled vinegar. Let's blend this until thick and completely broken down. Look at the results. This looks beautiful, nice and thick. Make sure you scrape all of the paste because we need all of this. If your blender is having a hard time breaking down all of the ingredients, you can add 1 tablespoon of this chili water at a time because we do want to add as little water as possible to make sure we get that paste consistency. In my case, I didn't have to use it, and that's great, but you do have that option. Let's talk meat. As mentioned, you can make this with pork, beef, or even chicken. What I have here is 1.5 pounds of ground pork picnic shoulder. You can use any kind of cut that you like. You can go to the leaner side or even the fattier side. It really depends on what you like. Just make sure that you do have a little bit of fat in there for flavor. Guys, we are working with a lot of red ingredients And I'm wearing kitchen gloves this time. I don't want to stain my hands, but it is up to you. You can also use a spoon to mix everything in. All right, let's start with the paste. Pour it all in with the meat and make sure you scrape as much as you can into the bowl. This smells unbelievable. I should be making chorizo for a living, huh? All right, let's add the ground paste. Now, if you use the blender, it should already be in there. Nice. I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of ancho chile powder, 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika, 2 teaspoons of achiote powder, and finally salt to your liking. I'm adding 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt. Now mix everything in. So the achiote powder and the paprika are not only for flavor, but they're also gonna boost that red color. By the way, I will try to leave the links to some of the spices down in the description area. Look at these vibrant red, fiery colors. For our next step, we're gonna need a colander because we have to place the chorizo in here. But first, place the colander inside a larger bowl. Now, I did line the bowl with plastic wrap, but that's only because once that moisture starts to release, I don't want it to stain the bowl. So that's definitely optional. Place it inside the larger bowl. And now transfer all of the chorizo into the colander. Let's do that. Just like that. Now we're gonna cover it with plastic wrap and leave it in the fridge overnight. And the reason we are letting it sit in the fridge overnight is because it will release excess moisture, giving us the right consistency for the chorizo. All right, for time purposes, I have one here that I made yesterday. This looks so good. Come on, let me show you what it looks like. All right, check that out. It's not as wet looking, and look at all that liquid it released. All right, to mold, it is usually done in pork casings, but I don't have access to it, and it just seems very practical to do it this way. So what I have here is a long piece of plastic wrap, and I'm using a ice cream trigger release scoop. We're gonna do 2 scoops of the chorizo for casing. Place it at the edge or the end of the plastic wrap, just like that. Okay, fold it over the meat and then start molding with your hands and pressing on the ends. You want to make it tight. And then fold.